Hey everyone, today we're continuing our awesome adventure into the Corning Museum of Glass. And let me tell you, it's super cool. Before you even walk into the Corning Museum of Glass, did you know that there's a cool story behind it? It's like having a special key to find out why this place is so awesome. We're gonna explore the secrets that make this museum super special and paint a picture of how it became the awesome place it is today. Get ready to time travel with me into the past, and it's gonna make your visit even more amazing. So way back in 1951, a really important person named Dr. Amory Houghton, who was like the big boss of Corning Glassworks, had this amazing idea. He wanted to make a special place all about glass. Not just any glass, but the art, science, and history of glass. How cool is that? Corning Glassworks was so excited about this idea that they gave money to make the museum happen. It was like they wanted to share the magic of glass with everyone and teach us all about it. Then on May 29th, 1951, the Corning Museum of Glass officially opened its doors. At first, it had a small collection of glass stuff, and the mission was to teach people all about awesome things about making glass. Imagine learning about how glass is made and all the cool things it can do. Fast forward to 1996. That's when the museum opened something called the Studio. It's like a special place just for learning about how to make glass and letting artists and students get creative. They can try out new ideas and make these amazing things with glass. How cool is that? And guess what? The museum doesn't stop there. It kept changing and getting even more awesome. Now, they really love showing off modern and super cool glass art and designs. They collected art from famous artists and also from people who are just starting. It's like a big showcase about how amazing glass can be as art. Alright, imagine you're standing in the Corning Museum of Glass, surrounded by all these incredible glass artworks. Now close your eyes and let's connect with the history of this place. Feel the buzz of excitement as people from way back in the 1950s dreamed up this museum. Picture the first visitors stepping in, curious and amazed. During our visit, we got to check out this super cool exhibit that's all about turning a boring piece of glass into a totally awesome glass artwork, all by using hands. Now I'm gonna take you on a journey through this whole process. Watch it and tell me what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoy the magic of making glass.
All right, good afternoon. How's everybody? Good, wonderful. Well, welcome. Thanks for joining us here at the Corning Museum of Glass. Today, Katie is going to be our glass maker, and my name is Michael. I'll explain the process. So if you have questions, let me know. I'd be happy to answer anything that you are curious about, but we always like to start. Let's welcome Katie to the stage. Let's give her a big round of applause. Thank you so much. So she's begun by collecting some clear glass out of our melting furnace. The center of the stage, that's our melting furnace. It holds all of our clear material. Now we like to start with clear because this gives us the ability to add color. And we have close to 200 different colors to choose from. She's chosen a lagoon green, so it's a transparent green. She rolls the molten glass with these little pieces, these shards of colored glass. And these little pieces will stick right under the surface. It's a little bit like sprinkles on ice cream. But this is a fast and easy way to apply color to anything that we want to make. And because we have so many choices, we have them in a rack over there. We just pick which one we want. And this is the fast and easy way to apply the color. So while we will work on this, most of the time it's not going to look green. It's going to look orange because it's so hot. Fresh out of the furnace, that glass is 2,100 degrees. And then while we're working, this will never be below about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So Katie organizes the glass. She has the texture melted away from the color. She organizes this by making it round and even so that when she starts to bubble, that will be round and even as well. So keep a close eye on it. She has blown through the pipe, trapping air with her thumb. That air is pressurized, it's expanding from the heat from the glass, and the air will force its way into that soft glass, which gives us a bubble. So this is the foundation. This is the piece. This is how we start every piece that we want to make. Now this amount of glass could make something small. We can make a little drinking cup, or we can make a holiday ornament, but to make something larger, we do need more material. So we'll let this bubble cool down, and then we'll go back to the melting furnace. We'll get a second layer of glass. And we call these layers gathers. And we build the glass up in gathers because at 2,100 degrees, our glass is too hot to support its own weight. It's too runny. It has a viscosity like table honey. So we let this cool down, even using some compressed air to help cool it down faster. And then Katie will get back to the furnace. So if you look at our TV screens, I've just started an animation. This is what it looks like inside of the melting furnace. 1,000 pounds of glass sits in a ceramic bowl, and to collect it, we dip the pipe beneath the surface, and we turn and we spool or we wind on the additional layers. So we can just keep building glass up in this fashion. We can do this 2 times, 3 times, 6 times if we want, but every time we go into that furnace, we do get more and more material just because we have a greater surface area. So when Katie comes out of the furnace this time, she'll have 2, maybe 3 times the amount of glass from what she went into the furnace with. But this will be enough to make the piece that she has in mind. A lot of the things you see along the front of our stage, they were made with about this much material. So we would say that this is 2 gathers, and we could talk to a glassmaker that we're working with, or just a glassmaker after we made a piece, and we could say, I'm gonna make it 2 gathers, or I made a piece 2 gathers, and they know roughly how big that piece will end up being. But just like before, we organize that glass, make sure that it's round and uniform. We use wooden scoops to do this. These wooden tools are soaked in water, so the water will turn to steam, and then the glass will glide on a little layer of steam within that tool. So we can use those wooden scoops for sometimes a couple of years before we ever have to replace them. So they do burn out, but they do burn out very slowly over time. This tool only lasts us about a week, and we don't replace it because we burn it up. We replace it because it starts to tear, because it's paper. It's about 7 to 10 sheets of newspaper. We just fold that up, and we soak it in water, and then we can shape and contour glass using the palm of our hand. So this one will be good for a couple more days still. You can still see a little bit of the text on the backside, not well enough to read it, but it's just newspaper. But when we use these wet tools, we are cooling the glass pretty quickly. So Katie took a brief heat at our secondary reheating furnace to make it soft enough and malleable enough to really take the impression of texture from a mold. So we use a lot of different molds. The molds that we use don't tell us what to make though. We simply get texture, we simply get the design on the surface of our glass, and then we can still make anything that we want. So Katie used a mold that has 12 vertical ribs on this. Now I have these 12 vertical ribs on the surface of the glass. So because of the texture, the optical properties of the glass have been changed, so we call these optic molds. And we have a whole bunch of them. They give us different textures, and they come in different sizes for different styles of pieces that we're making. So Katie's gonna blow this up pretty quickly now. She doesn't want to spend too much time working the material or overheating the material because we can melt that texture away. Glass naturally wants to ball up, naturally wants to be smooth, so she works quickly to get this inflated. Now she's inflating this using an inflation system. There's a tube that she's attached to the end of the pipe, and that tube is connected to an air compressor. She's pressing a pedal, it opens the solenoid, and it allows air to flow into the glass through that tube. So she blows that up really quickly. Now, while she was doing that, she was making a little grease just off the end of the pipe, and that grease is how we'll break this glass off the end of the pipe later on. So it's the thin weak point in the surface of our bubble. Now it's a little bit like the line in a chocolate bar. That line in chocolate tells chocolate where to break. This line in the glass will tell the glass where to break as well. So we're actually working on the bottom of this piece first, and then where that constriction is, that's going to be the top, that's going to be the opening. But before we started, Katie said that she was going to make a bowl. So we'll work on the top of the bowl later on. But she can change the shape of the bowl a little bit further. Now, she can make this into a taller bowl or a lower and wider bowl, and we'll find out what she has in mind right now. It's going to be a lower bowl. So she holds that glass up towards the sky. When she does that, gravity just allows that to settle back and get a little bit lower and a little bit wider. If she wanted to make it a little bit taller, she'd do the opposite. She'd hold it down towards the ground, and it would stretch and elongate to create a taller shape. But just changing the angle of the pipe that's going to have an impact on our hot glass. But that is a really effective way to change the shape of the pieces that we're making. The more we tool them, the faster they cool, and then the more times you have to go to that reheating furnace to take it and reheat. Is this a stem, Katie? All right. So this is not just a bowl, this is a fancy bowl. This will be a compote. Compote is a bowl with a stem and a foot. So Katie's gonna let that bubble cool down, and when it cools, it'll become rigid, just like that first layer of glass did before. And I'll deliver some glass, which she will turn into a stem. So this hot glass that I have, it's going to stick right onto the bottom of the bubble. She'll wind it around. Then this glass that I have left, this just continues to drip and flow. So this is a great way to show you how runny our glass is and why it's important that we turn all the time. You can see it's still trying to drip and fall off the end of the pipe up there. So learning how to turn the pipe, that's one of the really tricky things. It seems so simple, but we're constantly changing the speed that we turn depending on the temperature of the glass. And that's always changing, so it's pretty tricky to learn. Nothing that we do every day translates into that fine motor skill or that dexterity. So it's a long process to learn how to become a skilled glass maker. So Katie's been blowing glass for about 10 years. We'll often say, though, that it takes about 4 to 6 years to become a really competent beginner in the glass studio. So it does take a long, long time. But she shaped that glass up to create a nice stem, even putting a little sphere at the center. And then we'll add some additional glass once again for the foot. So she'll give me a little head nod when she's ready, but to create the foot, she'll use a tool like this. This is a Swedish tool, it comes from the Swedish glass factories, and it makes a foot. So we call it a Swedish footing tool, but it's just 2 boards connected on a hinge. It's actually just a strap of fabric, and we can squeeze the glass in between the 2 boards, and it flattens out into a thin disc. But it's a really tricky tool to use. It's a very simple tool. The design is very simple. But if you don't have the right amount of glass, if you're not turning at the correct speed or squeezing with the correct pressure, it's really easy to bind the glass up in between the 2 boards, and you don't make a very nice foot. So she winds that glass on just the same way. Now she'll use that Swedish style tool. So it has a little notch in it. Line that notch up with the stem. And you can see as she turns and squeezes, it flattens right out into that nice elegant foot. Now this is one of those tools that you have to practice a lot to really get the feel for it. When I first started using this tool, I probably made 40 terrible feet before I started making really consistent, nice feet. So we make what we call a footing tree. You basically make a little stem. We don't make the bowl, we just make a little stem on the end of a pipe. And then you make a foot. And then you roll the foot back a little bit, you put another stem on. And then you make another foot. You do this 4 or 5 times. Just kind of stack them up. And then you throw in the garbage, you recycle it, and you do it all over again. But they don't start out being very round. It actually looks more like a fried egg when you mess up. That's the shape that you get. But with that 10 years of experience, Katie makes it look so simple. So we got a nice flat foot. She's been using these steel tools. Those are called jacks. And they're really one of our most versatile tools. So by using those jacks and the wooden paddle that I have, we can make a really nice flat profile for the foot. But with the completion of the foot, we're done working on the bottom portion of our compote. So now we're going to break this glass off of the blowpipe using that little constriction. Now, before we do that, Katie wants to balance out the temperatures throughout the bowl. The stem and the foot, those are fresh bits of glass delivered right out of the furnace, so they're still much hotter than the top section. So she's just trying to even out the temperature by using that torch. So that torch that we have just candling back there is not only for ambiance, but it is also for balancing out our temperature. So we can be a little more specific about where we're heating. Now in the meantime, I've been making what we call a punty. And the punty is a temporary handle. So we'll stick this onto the bottom of the foot, and then when we break this glass off of Katie's blowpipe, I can catch it on this punty. But we are going to break glass. So this is one of the precarious moments of the process. All the temperatures have to be just right. But we use a steel tool. That steel chills the glass. It causes little fractures in the surface. Then all it takes is the lightest tap for that bowl to break right off the end of the blowpipe. So now you have access to the top and the opening. But because we break so many things during that moment when we first start learning, we like to celebrate. Let's give Katie a round of applause. That's perfect. But that glass does still break like glass breaks at home. It's sharp and it's jagged. So we'll warm it back up, we'll melt those sharp edges away, and then we can keep working. But this is also a good time for questions. So does anyone have any questions? Yeah. Yeah, we don't use any kind of gloves or safety equipment. Do you ever get burned? Do you work for OSHA? I think if I ask, you have to tell me. I think that's the rule. So safety equipment, you can't really tell, but we are a little bit safe here at least. Cotton clothing is important. That way if something breaks or if a little piece of glass chips and lands on you, it's not going to melt a synthetic fiber to you. It's just going to make a little hole in your clothes. So organic cotton clothing, that's important. Closed-toe shoes, some type of safety eye protection is good. I like to wear a sleeve on my arm. I'm very sensitive, so it looks like I get a sunburn on my arm when I work with a piece of glass just from the radiant heat. So yeah, I like to wear a sleeve, but yeah, no gloves really. Gloves are more of a hindrance than a help. They get in the way, they impede our dexterity, so not really any gloves. But that's about it. Otherwise, we know what we can and can't touch. We know what's hot. Sometimes we do learn that the hard way. But some of those early burns that we get happen early in our careers. You know, they typically happen just because we're not paying attention, or they're just silly mistakes. And usually, you only make silly mistakes once. Yeah. So it's pretty safe. Burns don't happen that often. If they do happen, it's more likely that a burn comes from one of the metal tools. This is really hot. You're just touching 2,000 degree glass with that steel tool, but it doesn't look any different. So it's more likely that a steel tool would get us. I probably get more cuts just from handling, like our scrap glass than anything else. The last time I got burned, I was flipping a grilled cheese sandwich. So it was not, it wasn't even glass related, but that can happen. But yeah, we assume that everything is hot. We're communicating when we're in the glass studio, so there's a pretty defined path that we travel around in the glass studio. But if I were to walk behind Katie while she's at the furnace, I'd say, Katie, I'm going to be behind you. I might even put my, it's like being in the kitchen, that kind of thing. Yeah. So Katie's opening this up. She cut some glass off. You may have seen that. She cut that off just to refine the top edge. Typically, when that glass breaks off, it doesn't break perfectly clean and perfectly straight, so we can cut some of that excess material off. Then she's opened this up. She's got a nice big bowl, and if you look now, she's made a really big bowl. She used just heat and rotational force to turn really quickly, and spin that open into a big, wide shape. And now she uses the paddle to get a really elegant, low curve to her bowl. And that was the final move. That was the big, flashy finale for shaping this piece. But there is one final step left, and that's to slowly cool this. If we just let it sit out in the open air here, it's going to cool so quickly that glass will contract and it will crack and break. So we'll put it away into an oven and we'll cool it down slowly. But water at that punchy connection creates that thermal stress once again, and then a light tap should be all it takes to get that to break right off. That's perfect. Now you'll notice this little scalloped edge, that design, that comes from the mold all the way at the beginning of the process. Those thicker areas that are left from the mold, they stay hotter longer, they're heavier, so they stretch a little bit further. And that's what gives us that excellent design. But there we have it. Let's hear it one more time for Katie Hubbs. So tomorrow we'll see that true color after it cools down. So that's a process that we call annealing. That oven is 965 degrees Fahrenheit. We'll put everything that we make throughout the day into that oven, and then we cool it all down slowly. So that cooling time will take about 12 hours, but it's determined by how thick or how thin the glass is. So a lot of the things that we make, we can cool down in 12 hours, but much thicker things would cool for much longer.